Okay, shall we? All right. So I'm going to say welcome everybody to the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, September 9th, 2025. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 10:33 a.m. I'm going to forego the land acknowledgement statement because I read one or delivered one an hour and a half ago. I'm going to ask councillors whether you have any pecuniary interest or conflict of interest to declare with regards to our report. I have not been informed of any open forum, so we're going to go straight to our staff report, and that's the March 2025 Ice Storm Review and Preparedness Enhancements. Fire and Emergency Services. Chief Van Dam, that must be you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, my name's on the first little bit there, but this was a joint effort with all of senior management and staff from the ice storm. There were some lessons learned. There's some pieces that I'm going to say our staff, their first time dealing with such a large event. And fortunately for this municipality, there was no injuries or any loss of life that we had to be dealing with. It was, by most accounts, just an inconvenience for a lot of people, and some people were inconvenienced for a significant long period of time. So, as I say, that's the piece that we're working towards. I thank staff for going through the process. What we did was we did the best that we could with the resources that we had during the emergency, and at the end of it, we took our outcomes, had a discussion on some of those outcomes, and what can we do better to make it easier for us in the future and to better serve our residents. So moving forward, give you as an example, Public Works was very busy working with the District of Muskoka roads facilities after looking after our primary roads. And I'm going to leave all of their, I'm going to say, questions and that can be all directed to Mara. What would I say? Burned by trial, I guess, because that was Mara's first week and hadn't even moved into the area yet when she was being thrown under the bus, and so she did very well, and hats off to her. Other staff, I want to thank them because they made my job a lot easier moving forward. So. Yeah, you've seen the report. Is there anything that you want to ask? And for the most part, we're looking at bringing whatever we can to the budget process to move things forward. And if you have any questions to understand why we're asking for it, some of the feedback that you might have heard from the civilians is how come we had a warming station down here in Port Severn before MacTier, and we didn't have one going, and that was because of the MacTier library had hydro, and we still didn't have hydro up there, but we knew what was going, and we were following requests if people were giving us any. The District of Muskoka set up an ice storm hotline, and any requests that went through that hotline were forwarded to us to deal with. So if somebody needed something, we were working on it.
Well, before we get into in-depth conversation or not on this, I for one greatly appreciated the report, but also greatly appreciated the how well everything went for our township during that period, in spite of the fact that we had residents without power for a couple of weeks. Interestingly enough, because people have often asked me, and personally, the number one complaint I got from everyone, and they weren't blaming the township, the number one complaint, they ran out of propane. And, you know, and the truck couldn't come down the road because, in some cases, because the tree that was on the ground was wrapped with a hydro line or something like that. So therefore, we couldn't just go in and cut it. But no, I received relatively few complaints. Not that I would receive most of them, but relatively few. But the number one was we ran out of propane.
Your worship, I can bring that up. So that was a district-wide issue, and fortunately, working at the district level with them on this urgency, we were able to do that, because the other piece was they were scared that half load season was on and they weren't allowed to be on they were only filling their trucks to half loads, and that was a quick fix once we were made aware of the situation. And it was, you just waved that and we made it happen. But cooperation between the district and the lower tier municipalities was, during this emergency, a great improvement from the past.
Well, that's good to hear, and I'll make one final comment before going to Councillor Predko. I think the other thing that our township's success, if you will, in surviving the ice storm was the attitude of our residents. Most residents say, "Yep, we live here. These things can happen. We're going to take care of ourselves," and most of them were able to do that mostly until the propane ran out. Anyway, Councillor Predko, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I just wanted to actually, make sure that thanks went out to all of the staff and operations and in the fire department, and for all that everybody did during that time, because it was a very stressful time. The one thing that I think is kind of missing from the report, or maybe from the analysis, is the impact that the volume of snow that we had over the winter led to. So the report's primarily dealing with the ice event, but we did have a number of snow events, which I think was adding to complications for the response for ice, as well as there were issues throughout the winter trying to figure out where to put the snow that was on the side of the roads, getting the roads wide enough so that cars could maneuver around each other. So that's one area that I'm sure you guys have been thinking about and talking about, and I know Ms. Engel already has her microphone ready for a comment, and maybe I'll let you make that comment.
Through you, Mayor Coots here. Luckily, when the ice storm hit, we'd seen fairly significant thaw along the side of the road, so it didn't impact our ability to clear and maintain. It did lengthen the amount of time it took us to access everything, because once we were getting into parks, cemeteries, those areas, there were quite a few areas that were still either snow covered or ice packed that we had to wait to access. But that said, winter's winter. We have big ones, we have mild ones. This was a big one. Luckily, we had a bit of a window between the winter and the ice. I will say most of what we were dealing with, as it says in the report, were dead trees, existing dead trees. And that's something that I have coming forward in capital to start to address, to just make ourselves a little more resilient to these type of events, because we are seeing very mild winters, which means very little precipitation, and that's harsh on the trees. We're seeing major winters that's also harsh on our tree coverage. We have droughts like that we did this summer, and one of the things we noticed is a lot of the birch trees along the roadside were impacted. We had to wait a bit for them to come back up, and some didn't, and we removed them. But then with the drought, we saw them coming back down again. So climate change overall is having a huge impact on the tree canopy, both urban and in areas like this. And I think that's something that we have to start addressing moving forward. I also wanted to add, which you had already mentioned, I have dealt with a number of ice storms previously in an urban setting. I was so impressed up here to see it go from the residents putting all of their trees on the roadway and making more work for us, to up here where the pressure wasn't quite so high because the residents were so active in assisting and at least getting it off the road for us. I was really impressed with the residents in the area.
Thank you. And then I guess the follow-up comment to what you were saying about the trees, in particular, the residents, I've had a number of different calls from people asking if the township can bring down some of the trees that are leaning on the road and look like they are not stable for the coming year. But it sounds like that's part of your purview and oversight for where you want to go in the future. And then the other area is that a lot of trees have fallen from the shore road allowance on the waterways and are lying in channels. And the question is whose responsibility is to help clear that. Residents do it, but they have asked if the township or the MNRF is responsible for making sure that the waterways are clear of tree debris.
Through you, Mayor Coutier, I would have to investigate that further. We can certainly assist if you give me the money, we can do anything. So it is something that I can look into, whether it is our responsibility or MNR, or if it is MNR, if they're going to actively be responding to it, or if it's something we want to look at ourselves.
I'd go after Transport Canada because they're responsible for navigable waters.
That's true. I'll leave that
I don't
to
think they'll
staff.
do anything, but that's who I'd go after.
We can leave that with staff. Anyway, but thank you. But the transfer switches and generators would be a huge upgrade for that north end of the township where they were without power for extended period of time. Thank you.
I just wanted to make one additional comment before going to Councillor Bocek, and that is I was talking to a couple of the plow drivers sometime in the winter, and they were talking about benching. And I said, oh, and benching is where they push the top half of the snowbank back. And the one fellow said he's been plowing here for, I think, 30 odd years or something. I don't know how many, whether it's the township. He said, never done it, never had to. And this year, because we didn't have a melt, that's how much snow stuck around. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. After reading this report, I see there was a number of items that are going to need to be budgeted for. And a couple in particular interested me, and one was when it came to the wood chipper. Being very familiar with that aspect, I've never seen a tree fall on a road where you throw the whole tree into a wood chipper. First, it has to be chainsawed up and then put into the wood chipper. So when you're considering items like this for the budget, not only would I consider all the equipment that's needed to perform this task, but also include in the budget the training that it would take, especially for chainsaw operator, things like that, for safety reasons and insurance reasons, that you consider in your budget the proper training for our fire department and for our operations staff. It's my only comment.
Thank you. Yes.
Through you, Mayor Coutier. Yes, Councillor Bocek, I have included training. We do have some staff trained with the chipper. The intent with the chipper is more with handling the brush and the branches that come down. You're absolutely right. The stem or that log gets set aside. It's the branches and such, which right now we pile a bunch of branches into the truck, which means we have very limited capacity, and then we're taking it to the landfill and paying to dispose of it. The idea is that if we can now be chipping all of these branches, even from our regular brush operation, we can reuse those wood chips. So we're not paying for disposal, we're being a little more environmentally friendly, and we're being a lot more efficient.
And to follow up to through you, Mayor, for a little bit of comedy relief here. As you know, when you take your branches to the landfill or to the station, they're only allowed to be 4 feet in length. So you'd have to take it back and chainsaw it all up anyways before you took it to the landfill. Thank you.
You had them going through your whole trailer load and they went down to the bottom and say, hey, wait, this one's 5 feet. Any other comments or questions? I think you've come up with a very effective report, and that's probably why we're getting relatively few comments, because I think it was an excellent report and excellent suggestions. And I think what's also very important to observe is how much actually worked well. You know, good plans, good people allowed you to do some fine tuning as opposed to say, oh, we have a disaster that we have to address. And so I think that speaks well to staff and their preparation for events like this. And the work that, I mean, we had people who are, you know, I don't know if they slept that week, you know, and because of the amount of work that was involved. And I think we, as you mentioned, Councillor Predko, I mean, we as residents, as our representatives of our residents, have to be very appreciative of all that staff did this past winter and through other challenging times as well as this particular ice storm. Chief Van Dum.
Just as a side note, after this report, we have our emergency training on Thursday with our Lumex group. Will be coming in, and we will be expanding on the winter event, and making it a little more difficult to expand our knowledge and to make staff feel more comfortable now that they've experienced it. It'll be a second opportunity that if we find any, I'm going to say, cracks in the wall, we'll be able to patch them at this time. So we're expanding on it, and Thursday will be a little test to see how we do if we put a little bit more pressure on it. So,
are you suggesting I should bring my winter coat Thursday morning?
You might want to, and bring your big boots.
Well, I'm going to read the motion and see if that leads to any other conversation. I have moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole receive the report regarding the March 2025 ice storm review and preparedness enhancements for information, and that Committee of the Whole support the direction of staff to implement the recommendations identified through the internal debrief process following the March 2025 ice storm, and that each department be directed to identify and prioritize relevant emergency preparedness improvements as part of the 2026 and future budget processes, and that staff be authorized to explore and apply for applicable provincial and federal emergency preparedness funding opportunities to offset associated costs. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. You may make a statement.
So one of the things that I've observed here is that this report is focused on the township, which is a great thing. One of the things that it would be useful for our township to perhaps help our residents is that you heard that some people had troubles getting propane because the truck couldn't get down the road. Well, people out in the water, and something like half of our township is water access only, and there's a lot of people with generators out there. And when those generators are running for extended time periods, they run out of propane. And we have many people in our Honey Harbor community who ran out of propane and couldn't get it because you can't get a barge in through the ice. And so the solution, in my mind anyways, and I've talked about this with some generator people, is that the generators don't need running 24/7 at these water access properties. If somebody's not there, the generators are there to look after some pumps and heat and things like that. And it would be useful in our travels as we talk about these kinds of ice storm or crisis time periods to find alternate solutions, one of which could be as simple as a little bolt-on box to any generator that would allow you to control the generator, run it for 3 hours on, 3 hours off, or 3 hours on and 6 hours off, thereby not requiring it to run 24/7 and therefore not resulting in many of our residents, most of the residents who have a generator would find that they'll run out of propane if they don't have something like this. So it is not just a township problem trying to service our residents, but I think, and I've explored this with generator manufacturers, and nobody seems to have a clue what to do. But from the research I've done, it could be as simple as, designing and inventing a little box, but it's something that would be very useful for all of our residents. And I think we should be thinking about not just what we can do to help the road access residents, but what can we do to help the water access only residents. Thank you.
I think you're wearing your inventor hat. But yeah, no, I think, to me, I know in some of the conversations I've had with folks, they're saying, okay, how do we better survive long-term power outages? Not 2 days or 2 hours, but 2 weeks. Because as you say, most people don't have that much propane, and, find a way to drain at least some of your plumbing, or, maintain the heat at a certain temperature, or as you say, be able to cycle your machine off and on. And if you're there, it's a little bit easier than if you're out of town.
Just to kind of go down that path a little bit further, to give you an idea, most people in water access only properties will get a 1,000-gallon tank, which seems absolutely huge, but if you're looking to survive a winter, you need that. If you go through, as we did this past winter, about 14 days or more of hydro outages, that'll suck that half of that tank or 3/4 of that tank dry. And if you have used it for anything else, if you're using it for heating, you're done. So your choices are buy another 1,000-gallon tank, or find some other strategy. One of our residents went out and bought a portable generator that was gas driven and lived at the cottage to prevent floods in the basement, and literally go down and get gas and come back and keep filling it up until he could withstand the time window. So it's not a trivial problem, and it affects a lot of residents out in the Bay.
All right. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Predko. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole is now adjourned at 10:55 a.m. to reconvene on September 10, 2025. That's tomorrow morning, by the way, or at the call of the chair. Yeah, but you didn't say at 9 a.m., but I'm going to say at 9 a.m. or the call of the chair. All those in favor? And we are adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. All right.